Are you a YouTuber who wants to get a good camera that can film great video quality and you don't know what to pick? Well, this is the video for you. I'm going to show you the best camera you can buy that is great for both videography and photography and that you can buy for $1,000. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. Now, the camera I'm talking about is the SONY A6400. The SONY A6400 is great for new YouTubers. I'm going to be starting off with everything appertaining to the video department. Now, the SONY A6400 films in 4K at 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second. Now you see me filming in 24 frames per second, and the reason for that is because the 24 megapixel video has a wider range on this camera than the 30 megapixels, and that's a great thing that this Sony has over Canon if you were looking into buying that. Now, I know you're all wondering to know what this 30 frames per second look like, and I'll give you an example right now. This is 24 frames per second and this is 30 frames per second. Now I'm standing in the same spot that I was before, so let's just switch back to 24 frames per second. Alright, now that we're back to 24 frames per second, I forgot to mention that these are both in 100 megabytes. If you want to use 60 megabytes to take up less space, you can also do that, but I prefer filming in 100 megabytes because it is a better image quality and so on and on and on. Now, if you're a person who likes doing slow motion videos, you can also do that. All you have to do is switch it to 1080p and then switch it to either 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, and it should be fine for you. Obviously, you can switch between 100 megabytes and 60 megabytes. That's up to you guys. Moving on, this camera was made for vloggers, and that's clear because of the flip-up display that we have on the camera. Now, the problem with this is that whenever you put a mic on top of your hot shoot, it's always going to be in the way. But don't worry, because there are alternatives. I prefer to use small ring. Otherwise, there are mainly no problems except for the eyepieces covering your ISO rating. So if you want to see the ISO rating, you can also take the eyepiece off. Now, there are a few cons to this camera, and one of them being the lack of in-body stabilization on this camera. Now, here's a quick vlogging test to show you guys what I mean by the lack of in-body stabilization. Of course, I have an OSS lens on, but you can imagine it's a little shakier than this, and it doesn't get better with the 1655. So this is why I recommend a gimbal, and that's a big problem for most vloggers. If they're going to be vlogging on the streets, their camera is going to be always bumping up and down. And a solution to this would be a camera gimbal, but those are quite expensive. Now, the base kit for the A6400 is the body with a 16-55mm lens. Now, the problem with this lens is that it doesn't have optical stable shot. Now, what I did is went and bought an 18-135 lens which has optical steady shot, and it's a great lens. But in the end, if you're a vlogger, I suggest just buying a gimbal. Now, if you're a vlogger and don't have that strict of a budget, you could anytime go to Amazon and buy a gimbal. I also put in the description down below a link to the Ronin S DJI's gimbal for cameras, so check that out and let's move on. Now, there ain't much to say about the video on this camera except for that it is awesome. Right now, in fact, I'm actually filming with the camera and you can see how good the quality is. Now, a big thing to note about this camera is that it has awesome autofocus. I'm in focus right now and you can see the stuff in the back, but it's not crisp. If you stop the video right now and take a screenshot of the video, you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, if I come closer, you can see how clear it is. If I get back, you can also see that it's still focused on my face and it's not focused on the things behind me. So right now I'm in aperture priority mode. So if I come closer, the background is going to be blurred, and you can see how clear everything is in 4K. If I get back, it's not going to be blurred as much, but it's still going to be focused in on my face. There are other shooting modes called program auto, manual exposure, and shutter priority. So for camera quality, that's about all that I have. Now I want to move on to the design of this camera. So as I said, I'm using the 18-135mm lens. Now obviously, since this is a Sony, they're going to be using their E-mount. Now, a quick tip when you guys are changing out the lenses on your Sony A6400 or any other mirrorless camera, camera, make sure that the camera is facing down with the sensor facing down so no dust gets onto the 24 megapixel ASPC sensor, because that would be tragic, and if you don't have a warranty, you guys are going to have to go through all of that stuff. And you guys are going to hit a like because I just told you that, because my channel is greatly helped when you do. We can actually see that the camera is quite small, and when I mean small, I mean small. When I first saw this thing at Best Buy, I was shocked at how small it was compared to my previous camera, the Canon 80D. And just for a reference, I have here a popsicle stick. This thing is as big as the camera, and I mean this in length. It's longer with my 1835 lens on, and that's quite a long lens. It's even shorter with the 1655mm, as would be expected. Now for the width, it's about that much, I would say. And this thing isn't big compared to my head, obviously. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick example on how small it is. Also, this camera in height is about, I don't know, maybe half of this stick, maybe not even that. And the reason for this is that Sony wanted to make this camera compact and easy to carry around. Now the big problem that I have with that is that I can only fit 3 fingers onto the grip, and that's about how big the grip is. Now I could probably pinch my fingers together and then I could fit it onto the camera, but still the grip is small. So what I did is I went to Amazon and decided to buy a grip, an extra grip, and I put that onto the bottom of the camera. And that also holds more batteries than just one, which takes me to another big issue with this camera, and that is its batteries are small. One battery will die in probably an hour at full charge. So to prevent this, I went online and bought some Ray Power external batteries for this camera, and now it's good to go. I don't have to wait to recharge my batteries. I just take it out of the charger that the Ray Power batteries come with. So that's another additional thing. I'll also put a link in the description for that. And just now I had to go get a separate battery because this other one was running low. So that's what I mean. If you're gonna be doing video, you're gonna be draining through the battery. So I suggest getting the batteries down in the description if you're considering getting the camera, of course. Another thing that you can do is that if you have a huge power bank or you're near an outlet wall, you can take a micro USB cable and attach it to the camera and the power source, and you can also charge your camera that way. So if you look at the rest of the body, there really isn't much to look at. Of course, we have the lenses, the batteries, but one thing that you're gonna need is a 128 gigabyte micro SD for video. If you don't want to get a 128 gigabyte micro SD, I suggest you get a 64. If you can't get a 128 gig micro SD, another solution might be a faster 64 gig micro SD, but just to be safe, I suggest getting the 128. But before we finish talking about the body, there is one thing I want to note. And when I was looking for the play button on this camera, obviously I was used to the Canon 80D before and I knew where that was, but this was a totally different camera to me, so I couldn't find where to press to play the video. Luckily I found it on the side, and it's a bit of a strange place to put it, but if you guys feel like you're gonna drop the camera, you can also press the shutter button and it will start the video for you. So that's about it with the body that I have, except for, of course, Sony has its A logo for the A series. It has the Sony, you know, all of the basic stuff that is like on every camera, you know, just to identify which it is. So that just about answered the question if this is the best camera for YouTubers. Now, if you are looking for a good photography camera, this is also it. So I'm just gonna give you the basic knowledge that I know and a few things that I found out while playing around with the camera, which is quite useful. So, of course, I'm not a photographer. This camera has great photography, and since I'm not a professional photographer, I couldn't give you the most explicit details, but I can give you a few things, and that is that this camera uses a 24 megapixel ASPC sensor. It also has something that really helps me all the time, and that is scene selection mode. If you go to the scroll wheel and twist it to SCN, that stands for scene selection, you can choose where you are. If you're taking macro, if you're gonna take sports photography, if you're going to take nighttime photography, sunset photography, landscape photography, portrait photography, and even nighttime portrait photography, the scene selection helps with that. Of course, as I said, I'm not a professional photographer, so I couldn't give you all the details, but as for what I know, this is it. And I keep on taking pictures, and it is awesome. Also, another thing I forgot to mention is that the ISO goes from 100 all the way to 102,000 if you guys are going to be doing nighttime photography. Obviously, you can also switch it. Obviously, you could also go into the menu and enable it to go only to 51,000 ISO, but 51,000 ISO and also 102,000 ISO are very grainy, so you're not going to get the best pictures, but I mean, you can see perfectly fine at 32,000. And for the price, it's really just great. So that was my quick review on the Sony A6400. Is it still the best camera for YouTubers? In my opinion, yes. And if you guys are on a strict budget, you can also get it for $1,000. Now, if you can't afford $1,000, you can also buy Canon's M50, but this camera has a lot more features to it. However, the M50 can film in 4K, so if you're looking for a cheaper option, I suggest taking that camera. In the end, my advice is that if you can afford it, 100% get this camera if you're looking into doing more YouTube videos. And that's about it for this video, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you'll be notified on my next video. Hit that like button. Actually, don't hit the like button, smash it, guys. And also, if you dislike this video, tap the dislike button 2 times and then you'll double dislike it. Don't forget to share the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.